Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video, before getting back onto the local election debriefs, I'd like to discuss another attempt by the Tory media to convince us that rich people should be given unnecessary tax breaks during a cost of living crisis where some on low incomes are still being squeezed, which they don't seem to care about in the slightest. So our old friend VAT on private school fees, only this time they've come up with what I think might be the most ridiculous argument yet. Such is their desperation. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So, The Times, earlier this week, it may be amongst the Tory client media, but it's usually the serious one. Yet in trying to push to persuade people that Labour should put the tax break back on private school fees, they've come up with reasoning that wouldn't look out of place in the Daily Express. The headline is, "School fees leave families on £100,000 with less than minimum wage." Now, you can tell that they know that they're not being serious because the less than minimum wage part is in quotation marks. This is the sign of a publisher who doesn't want to take direct responsibility for what's being said. And quite right, because it's the sort of reasoning that approaches clown levels of unseriousness. The argument is that once you take off private school fees for two children, then households on £100,000 can actually find themselves with less money left over than those on minimum wage. It's basically an argument which goes like this. So if rich people spend all their money on luxuries, they can end up poor. So genuinely low income workers should either pay higher taxes or accept lower public spending so that we can give these rich people a helping hand to cover the costs of their luxury spending. That is their argument. Compare and contrast with how they reported people on genuinely low incomes complaining about the cost of essentials a couple of years ago, like food and energy. Well, what did they say? Cancel Netflix, stop spending more than 30 pence on meals, get a better job. Why doesn't this advice also apply to those on six-figure incomes? These people are not championing ambition or aspiration. They're championing entitlement, but entitlement for those with lots of money. Those on low incomes are not entitled to anything because, as far as the Tories are concerned, your income is in direct proportion to your effort and worth. So those on low incomes are lazy or feckless and deserve no regard. But those on higher incomes, if they can't make their budgets, even with tens of thousands of pounds a year being spent on frivolous luxuries, they should be given more free money because they are putting in this arbitrary level of effort that low-income workers are not. We have state education in the UK. You send your child there, it doesn't cost you anything. If these people can't afford private schools, they can send their kids to the state school. They'll have the same chance of getting a good education as well. They just won't get the child abuse, rendering their offspring emotionally damaged into the bargain. Hard-working, bright kids get top grades in state schools. It's really that simple. The reason people pay for private education is not to give their kids a better education, but to boost their life chances beyond their collective work ethic and talent. That's not aspiration, that's entitlement. It's a system that puts lower quality people ahead of the more deserving in the workplace and is a detriment to wider society. We should actually charge people an extra tax for sending kids to private school, not give them tax breaks. Like the sugar tax, we should say, look, this is harmful. This is harmful to wider society. So if you're going to do it, okay, we'll not make it illegal, but you are going to pay extra so that we can put in place public programs to cover the damage caused. And you get these people saying, but those on £100,000 a year aren't rich. Yeah, they are. The median household income in the UK is £38,000 a year gross, right? If you're earning more than 2.5 times the median, you're rich. The definition of relative poverty, remember, is 2/3 of the median. So if applying the same process in reverse, the definition of relative wealth would actually be about £57,000 a year. Not that any such measure seems to exist. The government frequently use measures for poverty, but not really wealth. When I was unemployed, I had to sacrifice gas. So I couldn't have central heating, I couldn't have hot water. I wasn't spending money on sending people to private school. Didn't even have Netflix. Not that it existed at the time. Didn't have any subscription television service. I paid essential bills. I could occasionally afford a treat of some cheese spread and cheap crisps once a month for crisp sandwiches. That was my luxury. Now I make about £100,000 a year as it happens, but I'm not working any harder than when I was a teacher on just above the median income. You know, I have plenty to pay my bills, don't even have to think about the costs. Costs go up, I just go, okay, it's just going to cost more. I can afford to go out when I want, which admittedly is almost never. I can afford to put money aside for my retirement. I can afford a nice computer, and I can afford whatever else I want within reason. Just as well, I don't want Ferraris. The ability to pay for your daily living without having to budget tightly and still have enough left over to save for the future and home improvements means you are, by definition, rich. Just because some people are way richer doesn't mean you're not rich. If I were taxed more, okay, I wouldn't put aside as much for my future. But my standard of living would remain the same because I could still spend everything I needed to. But of course, if I decided to spend all my money on stuff that I wanted but didn't need, well, of course I could end up feeling just as poor as when I was unemployed. In fact, I could spend so much that I haven't got enough left over for the bills. Oh, I need more money, I can't afford my bills. You know, but what a ridiculous argument that would be. Imagine me trying to sit down with a group of ordinary members of the public in a pub, right? Tell them I make about £100,000 a year, but I can't afford to buy my round because I'm poor on account of the fact I keep buying a brand new luxury car every year. Nobody would take me seriously. Yet the Times can publish this and supposedly serious people will discuss it earnestly. Why? Because their target audience have that sense of entitlement. And like most people, don't ever critically evaluate arguments that suit them. It's like a lot of people, when someone just says a thing, if it happens to suit them, if it happens to fit their worldview, they tend to very rarely ask questions about it or go, hang on, that doesn't quite make sense. And this has been going on for a long time now, like several times a month, like across all the Tory papers, you will see some article attacking the VAT on private school fees. You never go more than a couple of weeks before another one pops up. But how many articles on the impact of, say, the disability cuts? Even the winter fuel payments issue, which they pretend to care about, that doesn't get new articles very often. Why not? Because that doesn't affect them. And their readers are not exactly those struggling with heating bills. Even though they are unhappy at losing the money, they don't actually notice the absence of that money anyway. Keeps coming up because most people working at Tory newspapers not only went to private school themselves, but they're certainly sending their own spawn as well. It's entirely a matter of self-interest, which requires them to keep coming out with new arguments, presumably working on the basis that they just have to come up with this argument to unlock it and get Labour advisors to go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good idea, just to revisit the policy. And because it can't be easy coming up with new arguments over such a span of time, they're now scraping the bottom of the barrel for inspiration. I know, if rich people blow all their money on shit they don't need, they actually end up being poor. They're in need of state support. For all the demonisation of low-income people on benefits, there's not a scrounger in the country like a rich Tory scrounger, is there? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.